You know that feeling when you scroll through a sea of PTZ cameras on Amazon, each one promising studio-grade quality, smooth auto-tracking, and a plug-and-play experience, only to find the ones you finally order either lag when you switch angles or lose the subject the moment they turn their head? I've been there spending time reading specs, watching demo reels, and still ending up with a camera that feels more like a toy than a production tool. That's why I wanted to break down a bundle that actually tries to cover the whole workflow in one package, so you can avoid the disappointment most hobbyists hit when the gear doesn't live up to the listing. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the Tenveo PTZ camera bundle is marketed as an all-in-one solution for 30 optical zoom cameras, each with an extra 8 digital zoom, an AI-driven auto-tracking system, a dedicated 7-inch joystick controller with a quad-screen preview, and a 4K 5-channel video switcher that also has a 5.5-inch touchscreen. On paper, that sounds like you could run a full studio setup for a fraction of the cost of buying each piece separately. The real question is how those pieces work together when you actually press record. Let's start with the cameras themselves. The 30 optical zoom is generous for a studio environment. You can frame a presenter from a distance and then pull in for a tight close-up without changing lenses. Because the lenses are built-in, you don't have to worry about swapping glass or calibrating focus manually, great for someone who just wants to point and shoot. The AI auto-tracking claims to lock onto a human shape and keep the subject in frame even if they wander a few steps. In my tests, the system performed reliably when the presenter moved at a moderate pace across a kitchen counter or walked from one side of a whiteboard to the other. It recognized the torso and head quite well, so the camera kept the face centered without jitter. However, when the subject turned quickly or gestured with large arm movements, the tracker occasionally lagged a fraction of a second, resulting in a brief off-center moment. If you're doing fast action sports or dance, you'll probably need a manual PTZ operator or a higher-end tracking algorithm. Low light behavior is another practical concern. The Tenveo units don't list an aperture value, but typical PTZ cameras in this price range sit around f/2.8 to f/4. That means they'll do fine under stage lighting or when you have a softbox aimed at the presenter, but they'll start to introduce noise in dimly lit rooms. For a cooking show filmed in a kitchen with only ambient light, I found I had to add a couple of LED panels to keep the image clean. The digital zoom, while handy for a quick zoom-in, does soften the picture after you go beyond the optical limit, so it's best used sparingly. Now, the connectivity side. Each camera offers 3 video outputs: 3G SDI, HDMI, and USB 3.0 plus an RJ45 PO port. The PO is a huge convenience. You can run a single Ethernet cable for power, video, and control, which reduces clutter on a small studio floor. The HDMI and SDI ports give you flexibility if you need to feed the signal to an external recorder or a broadcast switcher. The USB 3.0 port is useful for direct streaming to a computer, but you'll have to manage the bandwidth if you're feeding all 4 cameras simultaneously. I noticed a slight hiccup when all 4 were set to 4K at 60 frames per second over USB, so I dropped to 30 frames per second for a smoother experience. The joystick controller is where the bundle starts to feel cohesive. The 7-inch LCD shows 4 camera feeds at once, letting you pick the live source with a single button press. The layout is intuitive. Pan, tilt, and zoom knobs sit where you'd expect, and there's a dedicated track button that toggles the AI auto-tracking on and off per camera. Setting up the IP addresses for each camera took about 10 minutes, mostly copying the default addresses into a simple web UI and assigning them to your network subnet. If you're comfortable with basic networking, this isn't a hurdle, but absolute beginners may need to follow the quick start guide carefully to avoid IP conflicts. The video switcher/mixer rounds out